Yesterday, Max Verstappen stood trackside with his father Jos and watched his own team win a race he wasn't even driving in.
Race 1 at Magny-Cours, won by Danny Hunkerdaya and Jules Gounod in absolutely dominant fashion.
On the surface, that's a nice story. A proud dad, a proud son, a first win, but treat it as just a feel-good moment and you miss the actual story underneath it. This win didn't come easy. It came after a broken-hearted 24-hour race, a win stolen away by stewards, and a string of mishaps that weren't even Verstappen Racing's fault. None of that made headlines the way a Formula One result would. But taken together, it's a season's worth of setbacks that would have quietly buried most brand-new teams before they ever got the chance to break through. This is the story of how that team actually got here, and what it might be telling us about where Max Verstappen is really headed. Rewind to May, the opening round of the season. Verstappen Racing's car crossed the finish line first, on the road, 6 seconds clear of second place. For a few minutes, it looked like the team's maiden win. Then, the stewards' room got involved. 2 separate post-race penalties, one for a pit stop infringement, one for a yellow flag infringement, dropped the car from apparent winner all the way down to 13th. 9 other cars were hit with similar penalties that same afternoon, so this wasn't a case of Verstappen Racing being singled out, but it was still the harshest possible way to lose a result the team had genuinely earned on the track. Not a crash, not a mechanical failure. A win, taken away entirely on paper, after the checkered flag had already fallen. That's a brutal way to start a season, and it set the tone for everything that followed. Then came the one that actually hurt. Weeks later, Max climbed into the car himself for his debut at the legendary Nürburgring 24 Hours, sharing the cockpit with the same core group of drivers. And for most of the race, it looked like a fairy tale. Verstappen stormed from 10th to 1st. By the time he handed the car over during the night, his team held a lead of over 30 seconds. He'd already survived 2 genuinely frightening moments earlier in the race, once running onto the grass alone near the barriers, and once making contact with a rival car while fighting for the lead, walking away from both without consequence. Then, with roughly 3 to 4 hours left on the clock, a drive shaft failure on the right rear of the car ended it completely. Not the engine, the drivetrain itself, a mechanical part that simply couldn't hold up after leading nearly the entire race. Verstappen's own sister car, run by the same manufacturer, inherited the win instead. He'd led almost the whole race and had nothing to show for it. Okay, before we go any further, make sure you're smashing that hype button, because this is where it all finally pays off. Between those 2 headline-grabbing heartbreaks, there were quieter ones too. Mishaps at Monza, Spa-Francorchamps, and Misano that reports describe as not being the team's fault at all. Mechanical gremlins, bad luck, incidents caused by other cars. Any one of those on its own would be an easy result to write off as bad luck. 3 in a row, spread across 3 different circuits and 3 different weekends, starts to look less like coincidence and more like a genuine test of whether this program could hold together under pressure. None of them individually made headlines the way Brands Hatch or the Nürburgring did. But stack them together and you get a picture of a season that kept finding new ways to deny this team a result its pace had already earned multiple times over. My honest take: most brand new racing teams would have folded that narrative into excuses by round 4. The fact that Verstappen Racing kept showing up with a car fast enough to win, race after race, despite genuinely not winning, says more about the operation Max has built than any single victory could. Which brings us to yesterday. At Magny-Cours, Jules Gounod took pole, built a lead, handed the car to Danny Juncadella at the mandatory stop, and Juncadella brought it home first. Verstappen Racing's first overall win of the season in the GT World Challenge Europe Sprint Cup. It's worth remembering, this was also the team's first race weekend since entering the series Pro Class with Mercedes-AMG equipment for 2026, meaning the whole season had effectively been spent adjusting to new machinery while absorbing one setback after another. Max wasn't behind the wheel, but by every account he was fully locked into the weekend, and his own father Jos, who's been instrumental in building this program from the ground up, was there in person to watch it happen. Verstappen's own reaction afterward was simple. So proud. Well done, everyone. After a penalty that stole a win, a drive shaft that stole a bigger one, and a string of near misses nobody outside the paddock even noticed, that result meant something different than a normal Tuesday afternoon Sprint Cup win. Here's the question worth asking, and it's the one most coverage of this story skips entirely. Why is a reigning Formula One world champion pouring this much personal investment into a GT3 program most drivers would treat as a side hobby at best? He's not just lending his name to it. He personally drove a 24-hour endurance race on one of his F1 season's precious few free weekends. He's been reportedly linked to conversations with a NASCAR team owner about a future crossover. He's building simulator infrastructure his own junior signings now train on. Put another way, most drivers with his level of success are content collecting a paycheck and letting someone else's name go on a program like this. Verstappen is doing the opposite, building it, staffing it, and personally racing in it at genuine physical risk on his own time. None of that reads like a passion project squeezed in around the edges of a real career. It reads like infrastructure for something. My take. Whether or not Verstappen ever actually leaves Formula One, he's already building a version of his career that doesn't depend entirely on it. So, to actually answer the question, does Max eventually leave Formula One to build this empire full-time? Or is this just what a driver with real financial freedom does with his weekends? Here's my honest read. Nothing about what we've covered here suggests an imminent F1 exit. He's still fully competitive, still fighting for wins, still deeply involved in shaping next year's regulations specifically to keep himself there. But it does suggest something else worth watching closely. Verstappen isn't waiting around for Formula One to decide his future for him. Every team chasing his signature right now is negotiating from the assumption that F1 is the only thing he actually wants. This program is quiet proof that assumption might already be outdated. Whatever happens with Red Bull, Mercedes, or anyone else chasing his signature, he's already quietly building something that exists entirely outside their control. That's not a retirement plan. It's leverage, and maybe a life after racing that doesn't just mean stepping away from motorsport entirely. We'll be tracking this program right alongside everything else. Smash that hype button, subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.